Okay, and that was Ruby. Anyone else? Brother Dave, David, would you lead us in a prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this opportunity to come together. Continue to be with them and grant them comfort, grant them good night's rest, grant them a speedy recovery, Father, if that be your will. Be with those who minister unto them, the nurses and doctors and their family. They might have that knowledge and will to help them at this time. And let us, as brothers and sisters, be there for them also. Father, as we enter this study, let us look to your word as the truth that it is as we study the Old Testament. Let us learn lessons there that can make us better servants now. And be with Larry as he leads us. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Today's lesson is going to be in 2 Kings chapter 22 beginning, and it's on Josiah. But if you recall, last week we had a week off because we had our gospel meeting. And the week before that, we had gone through Hezekiah. And we had also pointed out that Hezekiah died in 686 BC. So we're going to be moving forward in the neighborhood of 50-odd years to get to Josiah. And just as sort of a, not necessarily, excuse me, just to put things in a timeline, after Hezekiah died, his son Manasseh ruled, and if you will check out chapter 21, verse 1, Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 55 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hephzibah. And then if you'll go over to verse 19 in the same chapter, it says Ammon was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 22 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Meshelemeth, the daughter of Haruz of Jotbah. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. So if you recall, Hezekiah was mainly a good guy, but then as it started to close out his reign, he sort of went the other way. And then Manasseh, when he started ruling, he was all bad. Then something got his attention and he turned to good. And then Ammon was evil and only lasted 2 years. And then we come to Josiah. Now, if you do your math, 55 years and 2 years is 57 years, and I said we was going to move forward about 40 years. How that all works out is the 55 years that Manasseh ruled, he didn't take over when his father died in 686. He actually co-reigned with him from 697. So there's about an 11-year period of time where there's an overlap there. So, and if you take into account the way they counted back in those days, that if I do something today, that's day one. And then if I don't do it anymore, today's the last day and it's counted. So it all works out to where when we get to Josiah, his reign covered from 640 BC to 609 BC. So that's where we are, beginning with chapter 22. Questions, comments so far? Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, reigned 31 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jedidah, the daughter of Adaiah of Boskath. I've studied a lot of history, y'all know that, both biblical and other. I have yet to figure out how they managed to put somebody in the place of rule at the age of 8 and 6 years old. They can't even tie their shoes good at that age if they had shoes to put on. But yet they were put in charge at that age. Yes, sir.
Why do they mention the king when he reigns and then say, his mother was rather than his father? Why do they go with the mother's side?
Well,
Do you have a theory?
I do not.
I was just curious.
Most of the time when you can track it back, it always, even though they go with the mother, it ties in with who the father was. But I have no clue why they put that emphasis on mother. Anybody else have a clue?
Mr. Larry, would it have to do with the fact that they're the firstborn of that mother rather than necessarily the firstborn of the king? Because we know Solomon was not the firstborn son of David, but he was the first, well, he was the oldest living child of him and Bathsheba.
Well, if you want to take it to that, yes and no, because most of the time it would always be the primary wife where things went through, and Bathsheba was not David's first wife. So we take,
Children-wise, for the lineage.
children-wise, yeah, but it gets, and I know David, Solomon, and all, when it gets to Bathsheba's son Solomon, that was basically ordained that that's the way it must be, but he was not the one that was strictly in line for that position. So again, I'm sort of riding the fence on it and not certain on that. Great question. I tell you what you did. You gave me something to go home and study. I will do my best to have an answer for you next week on that one. Verse 2 says, "And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in all the ways of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left." Now, if you just take it and go down through the king, the chapter we're looking at, a big section is skipped. So from verse 2 to verse 3, we need to go over to 2 Chronicles chapter 34. And that's going to fill in a gap for us. 2 Chronicles chapter 34, starting with verse 3. "And said unto the Levites that taught all Israel, which were holy unto the Lord, Put the holy ark in the house which Solomon the son of David of Israel did build, and it shall not be a burden upon your shoulders. Serve now the Lord your God and his people Israel." And I'm on chapter 35, excuse me.
I was trying to find the words.
Excuse me. It's been one of those days. We got here and I thought we was going to have to do everything by memory because we didn't have power when we got to the building about 20 minutes ago. So, all right. 2 Chronicles chapter 34, starting with verse 3. "For in the 8th year of his reign, while he was yet young, he began to seek after the God of David his father. And in the 12th year he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem from the high places and the groves and the carved images and molten images. And they break down the altars of Baalim in his presence, and the images that were on the high above them he cut down, and the groves and the carved images and the molded images he brake in pieces, and made dust of them, and strewed them it upon the graves of them that had sacrificed unto them. And he burnt the bones of the priests upon their altars, and cleansed Judah and Jerusalem. And so did he in the cities of Manasseh and Ephraim and Simeon, even unto Naphtali, with their mattocks round about. And when he had broken down the altars and the groves, and had beaten the graven images into powder, and cut down all the idols throughout all the land of Israel, he returned to Jerusalem." Now, if you notice there, I said if we just continue from verse 2 to verse 3 in Kings, we skip all the way down to his 18th year. So by going over here to 2 Chronicles in chapter 34, we see that something happened in his 8th year, and if he had been made king at the age of 8, he starts doing all of this when he is 16. And then on down that way. by the time he's 16 and in that position, it appears as though he is now calling the shots instead of having somebody tell him what to do and when to do. Questions, comments? No trick questions, though. Okay. Picking up with verse 3, then, it came to pass in the 18th year of King Josiah that the king sent Shaphan, the son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, the scribe, to the house of the Lord, saying, Go up to Hilkiah the high priest, that he may sum the silver which is brought into the house of the Lord, which the keepers of the door have gathered of the people, and let them deliver it in the hand of the doers of the work that have the oversight of the house of the Lord, and let them give it to the doers of the work which is in the house of the Lord, to repair the breaches of the house, unto carpenters and builders and masons, and to buy timber and hewn stone to repair the house. Howbeit there was no reckoning made with them of the money that was delivered into their hand, because they dealt faithfully. Now, how many times today would you trust somebody without oversight to give them money to handle a situation? Pardon? Some, but not many. It used to be, back in the old days, when I was a youngster, many years ago, that a person's handshake was worth more than their signature on a contract. Now, signatures on contracts are not even any good. Well, they're good, but people, they challenge it and drag it out in court and all like that. But here, again, we skip a little bit if we don't go to 2 Chronicles. If we go back to chapter 34 in 2 Chronicles, and verse 12, it lists the ones that are in charge. So it doesn't just say that, it doesn't just let you believe that, well, they gave this money to them and went on about their business. Chronicles names them by name who is in charge and taking care of this money. And Hilkiah, verse 8, the high priest said unto Shaphan, the scribe, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, and he read it. What would be the book of the law here? Pardon? I think I heard something. Deuteronomy? Is that what you said? Yeah. Well, that's part of it, but in essence, they're referring to the law that was given to Moses. Huh? First five books, Pentateuch. Why would they have to find it? What happened to it?
They put it aside, maybe?
All right.
For their idol worship?
I didn't emphasize it because I wanted you to think, but when I first started this class out today, I said Hezekiah started out good and then he kind of turned, and then Manasseh started out totally bad. Ammon was totally evil. So outside the Bible, if you go to other literature, the rabbis, the rabbinicals, they say that Manasseh and Ammon, and actually go back to Ahaz, all tried to destroy everything about this. So they had to hide it to protect it. So it was put in hiding for protection. And then they found it, they brought it out. Because what kind of character is Josiah? God-loving, and he's wanting to do what's right. Now, it had to have been around during Manasseh's time, and them know where it was, and then shifted again through Ammon. Why do I say that? What reason can you give that Manasseh at least knew about it? and didn't destroy it. First part of Manasseh's reign was bad. He was evil. He tried to do away with everything good, set up all the altars of the bad people. But then when he turned and started doing right, what is the guidance he has to do right? The only guidance he would have to make sure everything was done right was the law of Moses, the book, or the writings. So anyway, they find that book there, and Shaphan the scribe came to the king, brought the king word again and said that they have gathered the money that was found in the house, delivered it. All the work is being done right. And then verse 10 says, Shaphan the scribe showed the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest delivered me a book, and Shaphan read it before the king. Can you just sort of put yourself in the place of Josiah for a moment and think what that must have meant to him? Up to this point, he was good and he was wanting to do right. And how old is he at this point?
26.
He's 26. Didn't know this book even existed. Everything that he had been trying to do right was was verbal communication handed down, verbal memory. And now he has got the book in hand. Now there are some out in the world that write about this subject that say that it was not the book, it was not the book of law of Moses, that it was something that he made up, that Shaphan or Hilkiah made all this up. But if you go over again into 2 Chronicles, it specifically says that it is the book of the law that was given to Moses. So I personally believe it was the real thing. Then it came to pass when he heard the words that he rent his clothes. That's generally a sign of mourning, sorrow, sadness. He should have been real happy that the book had been found. He was, but the reason he was tearing his clothes was because his fathers had not done what was right. We find that out later. Verse 12, and the king commanded of Hilkiah the priest, and Ahikam the son of Shaphan, and Achbor the son of Micaiah, and Shaphan the scribe, and Azahiah a servant of the king, saying, now this next part is getting real important, at least I think it is. Go ye, inquire of the Lord for me, and for the people, and for all Judah concerning the words of this book that is found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that is kindled against us, because our fathers have not hearkened unto the words of this book, and to do according to all that which is written concerning us. Josiah sees that they had not been fulfilling all the law as they should have been, and it was mainly because of the predecessors, his predecessors, father and grandfather and so on. Verse 14 says, so Hilkiah the priest, Ahikam and Achbor and Shaphan and Azahiah went unto Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tikvah, the son of Harhas, keeper of the wardrobe. I'm going to pause right there for just a second. Because in verse 13, Josiah tells these people to go inquire of a prophet. They come down here to verse 14, and the prophetess they find is Huldah, which they know. Now, what makes this kind of interesting to me anyway is that Jeremiah the prophet was prophesying during this period of time. He had began his prophesying somewhere around 627 or so down to 580. So at the age of 26, we're in the middle, or into Jeremiah's time as a prophet. As we go through, it says that we find out that he was from Anathoth, which is about 2.5, 3 miles north of Jerusalem, which is right there. Some people in their writings say that they didn't go to Jeremiah because he was gone, couldn't be reached, but he's living 3 miles away. So the only thing that we know about Huldah is in this verse right here and one other verse just a little bit later. Completely an unknown as far as any scripture goes. So why did they go to her? Well, to me, it makes sense. Would Josiah have known her? Yes. Who was the keeper of his wardrobe? I mean, there's all that connection, and she's a prophetess. And also, it says that she dwelt in Jerusalem in the college. What does that mean? Other translations, other versions, have second quarter, which is, if you go back to the original language that it was written in, the Hebrew, it could be translated college, second quarter. In essence, it's an area that we had the main area of Jerusalem, and then when Manasseh was there, well, let's just see if we can find it. Let me see what I can find in 2 Chronicles 33. If I can get to the right verses. 2 Chronicles chapter 33. And verse 13 and 14. And this is Manasseh we're talking about. Prayed unto him, and he was entreated of him, and heard his supplication, and brought him again to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord, he was God. Now after this he built a wall without the city of David on the west side of Gihon in the valley, even to the entering in at the fish gate, and compassed about Ophel, and raised it up a very great height, and put captains of war in all the fenced cities of Judah. So it would be sort of like a suburb to the main city, the second quarter, and so she's living real close at hand, and all this connection within the palace there. And Josiah would have known that she was a prophetess. So when he sends them, and the others too, and when they go to her, she then prophesies. And then verse 15 of the chapter it says, And she said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Tell the man that sent you, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will bring evil upon this place and upon the inhabitants thereof, even all the words of the book which the king of Judah hath read, because they have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath shall be kindled against this place, and shall not be quenched. The next section says that she told them then to tell Josiah that he would live in peace, that he would not see any of this happen, that all of this would happen after him. That's in verse 20. Behold, therefore, I will gather thee unto thy fathers, and thou shalt be gathered unto the grave in peace, and thine eyes shall not see all the evil which I will bring upon this place. And they brought the king word again. Now, let's go to the next chapter and look at verse 29, because I've got a question about the verse I just read. In chapter 23 and verse 29 it says, In his days Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates, and King Josiah went against him, and he slew him at Megiddo when he had seen him. question is, if we go back to verse 20, and the prophetess told Josiah that he would live in peace, he is in a war and he gets killed by the Pharaoh of Egypt. How do you reconcile those two? How could he be living in peace and yet going to war and getting killed? Pardon?
He stuck his nose in a war he didn't belong in.
Stuck his nose in a war he didn't belong in. Well, that's a good way to phrase it. But in essence, this war that he got involved in, if he'd have stayed home, everything would have been good. The king of Assyria, Assyria at this time is on the wane. They're going downhill seriously. Because if we look at, I said that he lived until 609. Josiah was killed in battle at Megiddo in 609. When was Nineveh destroyed? The Assyrian capital. It was conquered in 612. The decline of Assyria had already begun. Why is Josiah going to Megiddo, which the Assyrians were in charge of? Because remember in 701, the Assyrians had conquered Samaria and taken captive the northern kingdom and moved them out. So the Assyrians are now roaming around everything that was the northern kingdom. By the way, where is Megiddo? Who can tell me where Megiddo is?
Southern part of Israel.
Let's see if I can explain it without using maps. If you're standing in Samaria and you look true north versus magnetic north, if you look true north, 10 degrees west, roughly 350 degrees on the compass, and go about 50 miles, about 40 miles or so, you're going to reach Megiddo. Another way to look at it is that's the area of Mount Carmel. And from Mount Carmel, you go to the valley of Jezreel. We talked about this 4 or 5 weeks ago, had maps for it. So the valley of Megiddo is to the south. It borders the valley of Jezreel on the southwest side. So it is right there, right basically at the base of Mount Carmel. So it basically is right in the middle of what would have been the territory of Manasseh, fringing over. We get to Manasseh there. So why would Josiah go up into that territory to do battle? And that was one of the kings of Assyria was trying to get him. At this time, there was peace between Judah and Assyria, had been for all these years since Hezekiah in 701. So he was trying to get him to come up and help. So when he come up to help, the Pharaoh saw him and killed him. I was asked a couple of weeks ago how sure I was of the dates that I put on these. And I do a lot of cross-referencing when I look to dates. I even went to check on Pharaoh Necho. Pharaoh Necho lived from, he was doing this between 610 and 595. He was killed in 595. So if he is the ruler from 610 to 595 by material outside the Bible, and then Josiah dies in 609 in this battle, all the dominoes just fall in place when you're cross-referencing that way. That's one reason that I personally go into the archaeological side of things when I can to find as much information as I can And I've stated this before, and I'll state it one more time, at least one more time. Everything to date, archaeologically, everything confirms what we read in the Bible. Questions, comments? I've got about 14 minutes. And what I did, I've got an outline here that's got 17 items on it that I wanted to try to make sure that I covered. How long did I say that Josiah reigned? About 31 years, from 640 to 609. Is he a good king or a bad king? Says he does right as David his father. In the 8th year of his reign, he seeks after God, and in the 12th year he purges the high places and the idols of Judah, Jerusalem, and parts of Israel. Now, what had other kings, such as Hezekiah, that was a good king, mostly did? They started getting people back in line, but what did they fail to do? Remove the groves and the high places and other things of that nature. So here, he is being complete. And if you look at him and assess him among all the others, I would put him as number one as far as faithfulness and working to do God's work. He repairs the temple in the 18th year of his reign. The book of law is found and read. Huldah the prophetess that we just covered, the book of the law is read to the people. See, he doesn't stop with him reading it and knowing what's going on. In chapter 23 in verses 1 and 2 it says, "The king sent, and they gathered unto him all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem, and the king went up into the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord." Is that an important verse for us? What does Brother Terry do 99.9% of the time when he starts to deliver a message?
Got your Bible?
Got your Bible? Why does he do that?
Sure, studying together.
He doesn't want you to take, he's trustworthy, and I not only trust him with my life, I trust him with my soul, but whose responsibility is it the day you stand before Christ in judgment? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that you have done what you're supposed to do? Yours, mine, each individual. So here, the king laid it out to everybody. What happens in a lot of religions today? Don't name names, but what happens in a lot of religions today?
They're led by the nose.
Tell them what to do.
I'll tell you how things, you can't interpret it. I'll tell you what it means. This is what we do. How many, I've watched a lot of sermons on TV. How many of them never pick up a Bible and just start rattling on philosophy? The Bible is the guide, and in those days, that was the guide, and Josiah wanted to make sure everybody knew what was going on. Josiah then makes a covenant with the Lord in verse 3 of 23. "And the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all their heart and all their souls, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And the people stood to the covenant." For those of you that have known me for a long time, what is one of my favorite book, chapter, and verses? Starting with Ezra, chapter 7, verse 10. What does that say? I have prepared my heart to learn, to do, and to teach. If our heart is not prepared, we will not learn, we will not do, and we will not teach. He makes further reforms, destroys idolatry, defiles the high places in Judah, and that is verses 4 through 14. He destroys the altar at Bethel, fulfilling the prophecy of the man of God to Jeroboam, and this is 15 through 18. He destroys idolatrous places of worship in Samaria and slays the priest. We need to look at this one for a moment. Verse 19 and 20. Because I got a question for you. Verse 19 and 20. And all the houses also of the high places that were in the cities of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had made to provoke the Lord to anger, Josiah took away and did to them according to all the acts that he had done in Bethel. And he slew all the priests of the high places that were there upon the altars, and burned men's bones upon them, and returned to Jerusalem. The question is, why is he going to Samaria, which was the capital of the northern kingdom that had been conquered by the Assyrians? He is the king of Judah. Why is he going into another territory to do this, up to Samaria?
Kind of the reverse of why Jeroboam set up the golden calves. Because Jeroboam did that so people would not go back to Jerusalem to worship. If Josiah doesn't go and clean it all out, they'll just travel a little farther to the next place.
And what had happened, as we've already stated, about Assyria being in control, their power is going away. So now he is going back and trying to unite and bring things back together. You were spot on that. Very good. Questions, comments? He commands the observances of the Passover in the 18th year of his reign, which is again putting them back the way they're supposed to. He puts away all the abominations in Judah in order to perform the words of the law. Josiah's service to the Lord is unsurpassed by any king before him or after him, and that's in verse 25 of 23. Verse 25. And like unto him was there no king before him that turned to the Lord with all his heart, and with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, neither after him arose there any like him. What do we find in the New Testament in Matthew and Mark about the first and greatest commandment? When asked by the Pharisees, love the Lord thy God with what? Heart, soul, mind, and then Mark adds strength. And so this is what he's going on right here. So the righteousness of Josiah cannot turn the Lord from his wrath against Judah. I mean, he's already made up his mind what's going to happen. It just wasn't going to happen during his time. And then Josiah is slain by Necho, the king of Egypt, at Megiddo. So that is putting it, I just hit the high tops of the waves on this one going through. You really need to read 2nd Chronicles chapters 33, 4, and 5 to fill in all the other blanks in here, and go back and just read this over again. But we're getting down to the end stages of even Judah being in existence. There's only about 3 kings after this, and we're getting down to 609. And when is the first Babylonian captivity? Only 4 years later, starting in 605. And then there's 2 more, and they're gone. So Zedekiah's the last king, and he's got that 11-year overlap there. So we're getting down into the waning stages of there even being a kingdom before all the captivity takes place. Next week we're going to be looking at Jeremiah, which, as I say, Jeremiah is going to cover part of this same time frame. Jeremiah was 627 to 580, so we're going to have just a little overlap and cover that. But I'll do my best to figure out why they go to the woman's side of things. So, any other questions or comments? I've got you totally confused, right? Nope? Okay. You're going to get about a 2-minute break then, because about 2 minutes before the bell rings. Thank y'all so much.